past
Welcome.
presidents.
Thank
You
you.
didn't have to like them, but gee, there's a
How's it going?
they served for 4 years, you know, just put their name up there with a pen. Yeah,
I'm back.
Obama's picture's back in the stairwell someplace. Well, we're gonna resume at 12:30, is that what it is?
Yeah.
12:30.
12:30, okay.
on. Welcome, everybody. I'm so thrilled and pleased to introduce to you Herman Barretto, who you've seen as part of the church service this morning. And Herman was born and raised in Tanzania. And as a young man, I forget why, he ended up in the Central Valley of California, which was where we were. And then I got a PhD and started teaching at the university, and then my very first class was this slightly impertinent, brilliant student. I was always aware of his presence, and he wrote wonderful papers. And then later, I developed a course in trauma and abuse. It was an elective in the program, and taught it. And Herman later took over that course when I was unable to keep teaching it. And he improved on it because he was working with vets. And he brought the vets to class and talked about their experiences. My father came with me as an old man to one of his classes. And I'll never forget it because my father was a conservative Presbyterian Republican and an elder. And he was suspicious of therapists. But he sat in that class and he said, I am so impressed with how those men love him and trust him. He was very moved by it. And then Herman had a whole career as first a clinician, and then a clinical supervisor, and then the director of the vet center. And he became really very well known and respected in the community. Also he'll tell you about it, I think, I hope, about a crisis response team that he's still involved in. So he's a very experienced, oh, I forgot that you were a priest. Before he became a social worker, for 9 or so years?
Yes, 9 years.
In 9 years he was a priest. But then he fell in love, and that was the end. So I welcome Herman. Thank you so much. Great, thank you.
Well, thank you so much, and for not only the introduction, but the invitation to come to Ashland. And both of you have been wonderful hosts. Mike is a great ambassador for Ashland, you know. It took me all around yesterday, and there was never any spot from the time we had breakfast at this wonderful restaurant until we came home that evening, went to a wonderful play last night. It was all just this good feeling, good spirit present. You are blessed. You're blessed to be living in God's country. You know, and with that in mind, let's just take a moment of silence and ask for that presence to permeate here and to permeate those who one day may be listening, because we're taping this presentation, that they too may get what they need to sustain their lives during these troubling and trying times. God of faith, God of hope, God of love, come be in our midst. Promise that where 2 or 3 are gathered in your name, you are present. So we count on your presence to speak to our hearts, to convert us anew, and to lead us into mission to care for your people, people that you send into our lives each day, and ask us to be angels of mercy to them. Out of our plenty, may we too be generous in offering faith, hope, and most importantly, the love that you have shared with us, that we may give that freely. We ask this in your name, O God of love. Amen. Amen. So this afternoon is an afternoon of stories and connections. My story, your story, the stories of people of faith that have impressed me, and the stories of love. It is a time of connection to our passion. What's our passion? To our purpose. You know, what are we here for? And what are we looking for? And what do we commit ourselves to? And the principles that drive that passion and purpose. as followers and at least admirers of Jesus the Nazarene. That's the main context of what we're going to be here. In order to tell you how I met Drs. N and Mike Petrovich, I have to go back to a moment in time, to September of 1974. I'm dating myself. I am an old man. So I'd come into, I came to America to pursue a dream. Back home, my dad wanted to go away to study to become an architect. And he had to give up that dream to stay home and take care of the business because his dad had Parkinson's disease. So I think that impacted him greatly. And over time, as we were growing up, he said, if you ever want to leave, your mother and I will support you. He always kept saying that. So at 18, I began to have these dreams of America. And I thought, yes, and there are so many circumstances that led to this solidifying of that dream that I decided to follow it. And my parents were very supportive. And I came out to study engineering. And that was my dream. And it changed. And I'll tell you more about that. That is what brought me to America, just to study and to seek my education. So coming from the dark continent, we were encouraged. My parents were very spiritual people, were very faithful people. We lived in a small town, and we got along with everyone. We were one of the predominant Catholic family in that town. But all around us were Hindus, Muslims, people of different background and faith experiences. And my parents got along very well. They considered each other brothers and sisters and helped each other. And so when I came here, it was all new to me, the divisions I began to find. Because there were no those divisions were there, but not as pronounced, as I would find out. So here I was in Coalinga, California, and it's a desert town, let me tell you. People wonder how I ever heard about Coalinga, but that's another story for another day. So here I was, and I promised when I left home that I would not fall into the trap of alcoholism and drugs, because that was what was coming in at the time, at the 60s, the 70s, that was the era. And I made that promise. And one night, I found myself, my roommate, he was a very Bible person, I forgot to bring my New Testament when I left home, and he was there. Every night he would say, Barretto, read me the Bible. And I would have to take his Bible. I remember the white covered Bible. And he never told me what passage to read. He said, just read me the Bible. So I would just open it to any passage and start reading. And that was it. And then he said, okay, when he was tired, he said, that's enough. And turn around and he'd go to sleep. So, okay. But one day he said, hey, there's a party going on tonight. And Major was a RA, the room assistant, was having this, hosting the party. And he invited you to come along. Back home, a party, man, a social gathering like this, we're there, we're having fun, we're going to be talking, and I get there into this small, the dorm room was already a small room, 2 beds on either side with a closet, and that was about it, and the desk. And everyone is seated around, and suddenly, the light wasn't a white light by the desk, it was a red light. I mean, what's going on here? And they pull out a bottle of sloe gin. And they start passing it around. The gin, yeah. And I'm thinking, I know that's alcohol because my father had a bar back home. And I'm wondering what do I do with my promise? I promised I would never drink. And there it is. So on one side, there was this voice saying, hey, you got to make friends. You got to get to know people. How are you going to know it if you don't socialize? The other side is saying, what about your promise? You made a commitment. And I was torn between those two voices. That suddenly I just got up and I bolted out. And I went back to my room, and I was broken. Terribly broken, because I'm 19. I'm away from home. And back then, you know, we didn't have the social connection we have today, where we could just call or have a conversation, face-to-face, a FaceTime conversation. To make a phone call back then for 3 minutes was $8.50. The money that I didn't have to blow. So I went to my room, and I was crying. I was crying because I was alone, I was lonely, I was tired of trying to explain to people where was Tanzania, Africa. And all of those things. And so I just sat down. Now I told Mike and Ann last night, I said, I wouldn't tell anyone to do this, because you may open yourself up to the wrong passage. And the passage may be, if your eye is the cause of your sin, gorge it out. And if your arm is the cause of your sin, you know what the story is, right? Cut it off. But you don't see too many one-eyed, one-armed Christians running around doing it. And we're all sinners. So some passages in Scripture is best not to take to heart. But this one, I said, I was desperate. I was desperate. You can imagine a 19-year-old, and you've been there. It's your story too. Some of you have been desperate. And you cry out in the night, like Paul did in the cell. Where are you, God? You've got to help me. And the Jesus of psychology, because I know we're talking mental health here, the Jesus of psychology and the Jesus of history are one and the same. I hope I can tie that for you together before the end of the session today. So here it is. I'm desperate. There's the Bible. It's not enough that I know God promises to be with us. I want to know for sure. So I said, you've got to speak to me. You've got to speak to me. And I pull up the Bible and I just open it up. Thankfully landed up on a good passage. It was a passage of promise. Because it's the faith chapter in Hebrews 11. You know, I opened that and I started reading it. It says, faith is confident assurance of concerning what we hope for and conviction about the things we do not see. Because of faith, the men of old were approved by God. Through faith, we perceive that the worlds were created by the word of God. And this is the whole faith chapter. It goes on to talk about how Abraham was called to live home, how he and Sarah were promised that they would have a child in old age. It goes on, you know. They showed that they were seeking a homeland. Sorry. All of these died in faith. They did not obtain what they had been promised, but saw and saluted from afar, by acknowledging themselves as strangers and foreigners. That spoke to my heart. I was a stranger. I had to introduce myself to people. You know, I was a foreigner. Much like the foreigner today who was being told, get lost. I knew that. I felt it. Because you see, in Coalinga, it was a town that was a very prejudiced town. And before, even before I just got there was a sign in the town, outside the town, that said, the N-word, get your A-word out of town before sundown. And there was a separation of church, of ethnicities. I went to church, and I was used to going up front. And I'm up front there, and the sign of peace comes, and I realize I'm the only brown man. And no one wants to shake hands with me. And I found out that brown people sit in the back. So I did, much to my chagrin. that's what, because that wasn't our tradition back home. In fact, I was telling Mike, our first president, Jules Nyerere, would come to church without security. He would just walk in, and we would sit next to each other. And at sight of peace, we would shake hands. And here I am, a foreigner and a stranger in this land. And it showed that this continues on this earth. They showed that they were seeking a homeland. If they had been thinking back to a place from which they had come, they would have had the opportunity of returning there. And how many people return back when they encounter that first difficulty, that first troubling time? You know, I said, I'm out of here. I got to get out of here. You know, I got to go back to safety. It says, but they were searching for a better, a heavenly home, where God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. And it goes on and on. God had made a better plan, a plan which included us. Without us, there were not to be made perfect. I finished that chapter, and my tears of sorrow began to turn to tears of joy, because I could feel that God was promising and speaking to my heart in those words. They were meant for me, that chapter. It translated very quickly. So I became aware of that. And I suddenly began to see, from that point on, there was all kinds of connections. I soon met the Seekers. There's a group of First Presbyterian people that came from Fresno. Through them I met, I told you, a church, Rick Irish, the Presbyterian minister. They mentored me, they helped me. From there I go to, they kindled me back a calling that I had to become, to serve the Lord. We did a ministry that summer, and to children. And I got that love back, and applied to go to the seminary, because that was my background. I was Catholic, and I wanted to be a priest back home. So there I was in seminary, and I go to seminary for 6 years. I come out, ordained a minister, and meeting families after families, and becoming part of families. People that were calling me their son. You know, people, till today, there are people that will write to me and call me brother. You know, and this connection that was made one night back in '74 continued to reoccur again and again, and that's how I came to meet Drs. N and Mike Petrovich. It was just this, it was, one would say, just a chance professor in a class. But it wasn't. It was part of the promise that God would provide as we go along. And so that's how I told you that, and Ann already told you that I became a priest, and in 1990 I jumped ship because I had fallen in love. For 5 years I struggled with whether I should continue to serve and be a celibate, or jump ship and get married and enjoy the company of commitment and consolation. And I did, and I am so grateful for that. Grateful that I got my MSW and that I can be here today. When I retired, sorry, I go back because Dr. N was my professor in 1990, and later on when Mike, who was chief of psychology at Kaiser Hospital, retired, was seeking to get involved with the community, it had just so happened that we needed a consultant at our agency. You know, it's strange how God makes things happen, and they happen and also provides. And there Mike became our consultant and provided, during my 6.5 years of my tenure, tremendous, tremendous insight for how to work with veterans and how to care for veterans. And what I kind of knew but found out more in visiting with you was the connection that you had, both of you, to your parents, to your fathers. You know, your dad being a World War II veteran, who suffered also greatly from PTSD, as we know. And your dad too, even having said stateside, saw the carnage, the human carnage that war brings to us. And your dad, as a medic, provided care. But it impacted him for the rest of his life. So here it is. Mike provided us with great counsel. This is my brief introduction. And rather than lest I get carried away, I want you to take a moment to introduce yourself. Just briefly. And we're a small group, and you can do it really quickly. Your name, what passion does your faith evoke in you, and how do you sustain your commitment? Your commitment to humanity, your commitment to this community, this great community of Ashland, your commitment to living. And we'll just do a popcorn here. Anyone, fire up. And if you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it too. I'll stop at 5. Okay, so let's go. Anyone, your name, what passion does your faith evoke in you? And how do you sustain your commitment?
I'll go first. The other Catholic in the room.
Oh, okay.
So, mine's Mike Hamill and my wife Chris. And I work with St. Vincent de Paul. That's kind of my passion. And we help in Ashland and Talent with poor people and the homeless and just people in need overall. A lot of people are not destitute, but they need rent help or utility help or driver's licenses and all kinds of things that need financial help.
Of course.
And we don't ask race, religion, creed, anything like that at all.
Nice.
Just anybody who calls in, we help. So.
Yeah. You're a true Vincentian, because that was what Vincent was all about.
Right. Yeah.
That's all Vincent saw, and that's all Vincent did. Was much like Mother Teresa. So thank you.
You sustain your commitment.
Volunteering.
A volunteer. Sorry. You were. Sorry.
Oh, no.
Go ahead. No,
No,
Chris.
I'm not next.
No, you were saying how does you sustain?
Well, just by working every month, at our,
He's
at least
dedicated.
3 or 4 times a month.
Dedicated, very dedicated.
Dedication.
Yeah.
So dedication
Yeah.
sustains you.
Yeah,
Right.
and we have it's a lot of time to work in, but if we get somebody, we help till they're pretty much done. So sometimes it extends out for days or even sometimes weeks before you finally help.
Nice. Thank you for sharing.
Mike Petrovich, glad you're here. I think I learned a lot more from you than you did for me during those consulting years. You're a great leader. My grandparents I never met came from Ukraine, and I got invited to join the sister city relationship here. Spiatakers, Ashland Sister City, where we help send food and medical supplies to people in Ukraine, but also help Ukrainian immigrants settle here in Ashland. And I got involved with people doing that and help where I can. And it just occurred to me, somebody helped my grandparents when they came to America. And even though I never met them, I feel this passion to pass it forward and give back to other immigrants, them in particular, immigrants in general, but that group in particular because of that identification I had. And sustaining commitment, I think, comes from connection with other people. That's where I get my energy, is just, my wife Ann has got more energy than anybody I know.
True.
And others of service who, just are like-minded, who believe in kind of finding big ways or small ways to just kind of step up and provide a helping hand wherever it's needed.
Thank you for sharing. It's so true that we were all once there before.
Exactly.
Oh, of course you may.
You mentioned desperation and still having faith. This happened to me as recent as 2 days back. On Friday, I realized I didn't have my passport. I couldn't find it, and my social security card, and I needed it for taxes. But then I had the consolation that whenever I travel, I put it away I put away my passport and social security card in the bank savings deposit box. But I knew that I had traveled to Canada in summer, and after that I had not opened my box. Friday evening I went to the bank, I found the social security card, but not the passport. And last year, about this time, I went through hell to get my passport renewed. So I kept on searching, I searched everywhere I could think of. There even came a moment of desperation where last night I shouted, I said, God, why are you harassing me so much? And then after that I said, you can perform miracles. So why can't you perform one for me? And I don't know why, late night, or should I say 1 o'clock this morning, there was, I would call it a miracle, because some power guided me to a certain file which I hadn't touched for quite some time. And I knew I had taken it to a medical appointment. So I just opened the file to see what papers were in it, and the passport was there in its cover. So divine help comes
And your
in
name?
ways that we do not anticipate. My name is Gul.
Good. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So it's so poignant and poignant to our discussion.
At one moment I felt, well, what am I praying so much for? And then I still feel guilty not praying.
Thank you for sharing the story of hope. Yes.
My name is Larry, and I attend here at First Press. My main interest in being here is I view myself as a follower of Jesus Christ. I could be in other churches as well, because that faith is universal. And I give credit to my mother for so much of how I view the world. Growing up in a little town close to Pasadena, we used to have these girls come and live with at our house, and they were always pregnant girls. And when they came, I had to leave my room, and the girls lived in my. So I said, Mom, why are we always having these teenage girls living here that are always very fat? And she said, because they're pregnant and they're not married. And they come to us from the Salvation Army because they can't be seen outside of the street. And their parents don't want them in their home anymore because they're pregnant and they don't have a husband. So we are here as a Christian family to welcome them in. And then when they're about ready to give birth, then they'll go back to the Salvation Army and have the birth there. So that's kind of my mother's side. And then my father was a World War II veteran. And I'd say, why do we always have these soldiers in the house? And these weren't American soldiers, these were Nazis. And I said, why can we have these Nazis at our house? This is after World War II. I said, because, number one, they're not Nazis. They're German soldiers. And they're immigrating here to the United States. And they want to become Americans. And they didn't choose to join the German army. As the German army swept through Europe, they captured all of these people. These soldiers were from Denmark and Yugoslavia and all kinds of places. Because they want to be Americans. And they want to be good people. And so that was another kind of group that kind of washed back and forth our house. So one night, off my father's side, big knock at the door. Two guys in black suits show up at the door. And they said, we need to see your father. Really? Okay. Dad, a couple guys, I didn't know him, so. And they see him at the door, and they put handcuffs on my father. And my mom is crying and screaming, and, why is this happening? I knew my dad wasn't a criminal. At least that was my mindset. And so it turns out that my father is taking retired U.S. military aircraft, which he flew, and they were flying these planes from Southern California to Tijuana. And in Tijuana, the planes were being turned over to the new Israeli Air Force. So my father is a righteous Gentile. And 2 weeks later he came home, but he still kept giving the planes to the Israeli Air Force. That was the beginning of the Israeli Air Force. And so that's kind of how I view my faith, is always looking as an outreach. The Salvation Army, my work was with drug and alcohol folks and broken families. So here in this town, it's wonderful to be with all these uprighteous Presbyterian folk. I'm part of that as well. But the message of the church has to be outside these walls. It can't be inside these walls. It has to be outside. So I'm looking for kind of that role outside of the church here. I'm not interested in being part of the leadership of this church. There are plenty of good people. I see them right here in this room, all very, very bright people. You don't need me for that. So I'm looking for kind of that place outside the church. Maybe it's a Salvation Army. Mike's up here at St. Vincent's de Paul. We just heard about BASE. We just heard about the Golden Rule. There are places where I could be of help outside of here. But it's all kingdom work. And I can appreciate where you came from in Tanzania. As you know, I came from Morocco. Yes.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. And also for knowing where your passion is derived in true service. Service to our fellow human beings. Thank you. We'll take one more. I don't want to hold you up past the time that we have, and I'll give you a break at some point to get some refreshment. Anyone else? Speak now, forever hold your peace. I did give you a chance.
Barb, you look like you want to speak. No?
These have been powerful voices, God, that we've just heard. My past is different. My parents were married in a Presbyterian church in the side room. And I've grown up going to the Presbyterian church most of my life. And when I came here, we were here to help our daughter and her husband run a restaurant because we wanted to be with the grandchildren. And I came down a couple of miles to church and started coming here. And I met some wonderful people, and Shirley Patton was one of them. And she was very active in everything in town. But she had been willing to be the moderator for the Presbyterian women, but she didn't have time to do everything, and she asked me if I would like to be with her as a co-monitor. And I thought, I'm not getting any younger. This is a wonderful opportunity. She's a terrific person. I don't know why she asked me, but I am going to be delighted to be a helper with her. And knowing her made all the difference in the world in how I felt about Ashland.
Thank you for sharing. So the spiritual connection that binds us all together, no matter our origins, and we are from many places, become one, our color, our languages, our orientations, our social strata, our religious beliefs, our political inclinations, our biases, our prejudices, our desires, our passion, our purpose, or our principles. No matter what they may be, the spiritual connection that binds us together is, and you mentioned it, the golden rule. You know, spirit, and it's different from religion. When we talk about the golden rule, we're looking at spirituality. And spirituality is so different from religion. We may find the two sometimes are used interchangeably or synonymously, but they are not. They're very, very different. You see, religion builds walls. And we have to sustain these walls. You know, spirituality tears down walls. That's where you want to go. Where is God calling me? It may not be within this confine of this structure. It may be out there. And I need to go out there. That's spirituality, moving us. Religion, unfortunately, starts wars. So many times. The Crusades, for example. Yeah? It was a religious war. Yeah. But spirituality seeks to end wars. Because we see the commonality with each other. Your dad was right to welcome the immigrants wanting to be part of this American experience and American dream. And to any immigrant that comes today wants to bring that, the goodness of who they are. Do they have faults, some of them? Yes. Do we have faults? I can tell you a whole laundry list of my faults. Or better still, just ask my wife. Nonetheless, there's goodness. And when we cultivate goodness, goodness spreads. So spirituality seeks to do that. Religion has many rules. So many rules. You know, we have liturgical rules, we have the rules of decorum, we have rules of how the parish council is going to be, how the finance council is going to act. All of these rules. But spirituality has very few rules. Do unto others as you would have them. As you would have them do unto yourself. You know, I just want to stay connected to my slides. This is what I ask of you, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. And these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and you shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. Anyone recognize that? It's the Shema Israel from Deuteronomy, chapter 6, verses 4 to 7, that hangs on every Orthodox Jew's home. You know, that's what we have to do. You'll sound this familiar to you. He has told you, mortal one, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? But to do justice, to love tenderly. In other translations, to love kindness, or to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. Micah, from the prophet Micah, chapter 6, verse 8. You know, these eternal values are expressed in Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, in chapter 13, when Paul speaks of the enduring gifts of faith, hope, and love. Paul says, all the other gifts will go away, but faith, hope, and love will remain. And the greatest of this is love. love for our neighbor, love that propels us to do what is good for the other. Yes, spirituality is very simple. However, very challenging, nonetheless, in its simplicity. Those are not easy words that we just heard about. And thankfully we have a whole litany of saints and sinners who have gone before us, whose light and life continue to shine brightly in our collective memory. Their stories reveal to us our potential, for they were very much like us in our humanity. Since I originated from the Dark Continent, and they called Africa the Dark Continent. Did they call it the Dark Continent when you went over to Morocco?
No, because remember, Africa's two different places.
Okay, so the top was not just south of the equator and not down. So we were known as the Dark Continent. And appears to be much, nowadays, hatred and heartlessness and, hostility to the Anawim, the poor of Yahweh. The prophet was told that the orphan, the alien, and the widow, these were the Anawim, the poor of Yahweh, that God, the faithful one, had a commitment to care for the poor, to care for the orphan, and to care for the widow. That was the calling. So in order to highlight that, I've elected to speak of 3 individuals and their stories to underscore these spiritual values expressed in our dire times, so that we don't lose hope during these times that we are in. I'll talk about, and I'll show you a brief clip on St. Charles Luanga, one of the Ugandan martyrs, and highlight for us the gift of faith. Talk to you, show a brief clip on Nelson Mandela, because he was a person who showed hope. And Immaculée Lubabweza, Charles Luanga, the Ugandan martyrs, he was just one of them. There are 22 of them who are canonized saints, but there were many others, over 100, that were brutally murdered, decapitated, burned, because they would not give in to the king at the time, and they would not compromise their Christian faith. And Charles was one of the leaders. The missionaries had come into Uganda, and then they got word that they were going to be persecuted, so they left. But before they left, they baptized a number of indigenous people and catechized them about the faith. And they were Catholics and Anglicans. And the new king that came in had a different lifestyle and didn't care because Christianity was confronting that lifestyle, and so began to think, I need to put them away. So he basically started to kill them. And they refused to protect their lives. They held on to the message. They said, no, you can kill us, but you cannot kill our soul. So that was Charles. Nelson Mandela, of course, you know his story. For 27 years, held in captivity. And, just hoping one day that he would see a free South Africa. And he would, along with his mentor, the Archbishop Desmond Tutu, kept hope alive. And he saw that happen. Immaculée, you may have heard of her story. She was a young woman in Rwanda during the uprising and the civil war between the Hutus and the Tutsis. It was quite a bloodbath in the 80s where we heard about, but we never really got involved there too much to go in and squelch it. But there was a lot of killing that went on. In fact, the river, they took pictures of the river, it was filled, it became a red river of people that were decapitated and thrown into the river. Immaculée, she was being sought after because she came from the smaller tribe, and her as they came to work to house, her father, they were Tutsis, and her father sent her to a pastor friend who was from the majority tribe, Hutus, and said, go to him and he will protect you. So she goes to him, and he does. He takes her into the parsonage and puts her in a bathroom, in a small bathroom. I think it's 4 by 6 or something like that. It was a very small bathroom with 6 other women. So there were 7 of them in there, and she'll talk a little bit about that in the clip. 7 other women for, you know how many days? 91 days. 91 days. Can you imagine being, even our bathroom is bigger. You know, with everything that was going on, to be in this place. She says, and she'll tell you at the clip, couldn't even move, and came out emaciated. But in there, she found her faith. She was Catholic, she was taught to pray, but as she began to pray the Our Father, it was difficult. You know which line was difficult for her? In the Lord's Prayer? She couldn't even say that first. Forgive them their debts or their trespasses, as I forgive them. She couldn't say it. How could she forgive? They just killed her parents, her mom and dad. They killed her brothers. She couldn't. She couldn't. Psychologically, she couldn't say those words. You know, and yet there she'll tell the story of her conversion. Today she goes around, she lives in America now, and she's a well sought after speaker to come and motivate people to keep hoping and to keep sharing. So how do we sustain our spirituality in troubled times? We'll just take a look at some folks here. So, these are the people I want to talk about. And I'm hoping this thing works. I was telling Mike that I'm not a tech person. I'm old school. I'm a dinosaur. I told you already. I went. But one of the things nice about children is you invest in their education, right? And then one day you get the dividends. And one of the dividends is that I can call my daughter, either one of them, and all 3 of them, and ask them, hey, can you help me with this? Oh, can you help me with this? And I totally ignorant. So one daughter did this, and I'm hoping it works. No, but I didn't check what's this.
There's that link at the bottom.
No, I'm going to get it playing, but I didn't check the sound. Let me get to it. Sorry.
What we need is a 19-year-old.
Do we have any grandsons in the room?
Yeah, we do. And I went forward and asked the tech people. What's the volume on this? It's coming through.
Putting together a slide.
child of the Ugandan martyrs. He's a man whose magnanimity, courage, and gentleness brought countless souls to Christ.
On my computer, it's perfect.
So what I do is I try to come all the way from sometimes we get a contract signed.
No, can you do this electronically?
No, I really don't. I said, I'll come by this. I'll come by this. So I kind of try to determine how I can best serve them. Because it can be so embarrassing. You're older and you can't get all this stuff. So that's one of my qualities.
Ranga was born on the eastern side of Africa in the southwestern part of the Buganda Kingdom. He was born in Birinzi to Mabingo Kadu,
See, as soon as John walked away, everything stops.
Okay, what we'll do, I'm not going to get hung up by technology. This part tells us the story. I wish I'd brought my daughter along with me.
Yeah.
They would have gone dead. And it's having a hard time loading it out. So. In any case, it just tells him about the story and where we go from there. It's a good time to take a break and get yourselves a drink and something and come back and we'll finish up. I'm looking at the time. It's 1:30. So it'd give us just take a 5-minute break and we'll come back in 5 minutes.
Clear-headed. Are you hanging in there?
I'm just thinking, I've already had quite a bit of coffee, but it still sounds good. It's on the end. Oh, I thought maybe you'd like some. Are you sure? I think I've had enough. Your name is?
Yeah.
Easier just to leave it, waiting to be here.
Oh, yeah, I'm not sure why it was not synchronizing, you know. Can't figure it out. Because I rent.
So is the YouTube thing embedded?
It's embedded, yeah.
On a slide?
Yeah, it's embedded. So that's why she said just click on it and it'll come up. And it comes up, but it's not connecting to the AV, but that's okay. Well, we went through it and we practiced it all, but everything
It's always the way the gremlins follow you out.
I'm telling you, check, you know. But at least we have the picture, so come up to the break.
saw
Yeah,
finish up.
and sound actually worked out for the YouTube, it's fine.
A letter said,
So I know it's embedded there, it's
and
just
this is
between
from-
here and the
and so
monitor.
now this is spread all throughout all the community of our So I have dismayed because now they can't do the freshman class. Because the freshman class has been alerted and they're waiting for the university's already saying they may not be open next summer. So for years, teachers. Like a miracle. It's not a big peril. But the letter's already gone out. And this came right from the president's office. Good man, good man.
Yeah.
But he's had 4 years to work with these structural problems.
By yourself.
And one of the things he did, kind of blamed it on his father. I know most days, finance. Yeah. And then, just kind of saved us over the last minute. It was kind of a lemon squeeze for the president. Well, we had a lot of turnover here. We worked on a balance sheet over here, income sheet over here. And very good person. So I don't know what I'm really frustrated right now. But then it touches so much. It's like freshman. No, this is why I wanted to stay.
It just told me that Valerie's gonna quit. Can you hear me?
Very high up.
It's all right.
He's
Usually
really
carry
short.
batteries with me, but I'm gonna get new hearing aids in about a month, and they're
Visa.
rechargeable batteries.
So they're all finance people.
I don't know technology.
Very well.
They're
And they send
I
you
can
so,
show you.
he's not a kid.
For them, it was maintaining their faith under extreme suffering and the threat of death. For Charles, they walk, and there's now today a church there where they were martyred, but they take them to this place to be killed. And they know they're going there to be killed. And there's a younger boy, Kizito, and he's also one of the saints now. And he was baptized by Charles. And Charles gives him hope. He says, hey, no matter what, when time comes for us to die, we'll die hand in hand. And he keeps him going on that, kind of the baton death march, and how the prisoners gave each other hope, in knowing what they were going to die. So that's even in the concentration camps, you know, that from World War II, we know from the stories that survivors have told us, you know, how they had sometimes just a small piece of chocolate was enough to keep that person going. You know, and so you see these, remember these stories of how we can inspire people with hope, and that's what Charles gave to the faith. You know, don't worry, things will be taken care of. And when they put him on to, they tortured him, and then when they he asked for the fire pit, where they were going to throw him on the fire pit. He asked to make that fire pit himself. So he put the wood for him to be burned, you know. And then, as he's on, they wanted to really punish him because he was the leader. So they started a fire, and he tells his executioner, even though you think you're putting fire on me, it's like water on my body. And those are the words that they recorded from what he said, you know. And then his last words, this last word that's recorded as he's dying, is take his last breath. You know what he says? The words of Jesus on the cross. And then he says, my God. So did he see God's presence? But he cries out that way. So that was Charles. A tremendous story from the late 1800s, you know. And today the faith in Uganda and across Africa is flourishing. In fact, we have missionaries here coming from Africa to minister to people in the continent that brought the faith. So Charles, the next one, of course, I was going to show you was Nelson Mandela. Fail me now.
I hope so.
So Nelson Mandela, you know about him. I just wanted to have a picture in his voice, because when he was at his talk, and if you ever have a chance to just pull it up on your YouTube, he has a talk, his inauguration talk. And he's very brief and talks about hope, the hope he has for a renewed South Africa, that we would not be racist anymore, that apartheid would die, and that this new Africa would emerge. You know, and he was a symbol of that. You know, for 27 years in the cell. What was really touching was that one of his captors, Brand, the warden comes to say goodbye to him, and he says, "We shall meet again," as he's leaving. You know, again, hope. And he has him in his cabinet later on when he becomes the president. And then he's now the place where he was held captive is a museum. And for 20 years, Brand ran the place. So the stories of hope and connection. And then I just need you to get some steps today. I hope you have your I keep clicking and it doesn't do it. But we have faith. Yeah, now I can click.
I hope so.
Would you like a chair?
Yeah, right.
So this is what I was talking about, Magdalene Vesa, and she was hunted down for 91 days. They came into the pastor's home. They were looking for her. They wanted to get her. It kind of reminded me, we had a mutual speaker, Ellie Oren, who was survived 3.5 years in a house that she was boarded by during World War II, and lost a huge number of her family and her parents and grandparents. And here she was in that small basement held. And one night they came looking because the pilot had crashed in the area, and the resistance had taken the pilot away, and they came looking at the homes. And then they went right on the stairway, and there was a pathway to the room where she was she and her mom and dad stayed for the 3.5 years. And you know, she comes out. I mean, they heard the soldiers, but for, you know, that protection was there. Just amazing when this Corrie ten Boom, you know, and others that have told their stories of survival. You know, but Immaculée, she tells hers. You know, she comes out. She's a young college student, 21, you know, at the time. Comes out emaciated after that, but she came out with a renewed faith. You know, and what's powerful here, the story of love for her. She comes back, she comes to America, she's now, you know, moving on, but she decides to go back to Rwanda. She wants to go back and see the families that survived the Civil War. And there's a friend of hers that's the warden in a prison where the man who killed her parents and her brother is in that prison now. And Immaculée goes to the prison to meet him because she knew him. They were neighbors. And she wants to, and he is so filled with shame that he's unable to look at her. Now, he's just knelt down. And she doesn't know what else to say, but she says, I forgive you. And forgiveness is not about her liberating him. Forgiveness was about liberating herself from the hurt and the memory of grief and loss. So she says that, well, her friend, who's the guard, is very upset. What do you mean? This man killed your family. And that's what you're going to say to him. And he was bewildered by that response. You know what she said to him? I have nothing else to give but my forgiveness.
Wow.
You know? And it was psychological. She was freeing herself. How many of us hold ourselves captive by that moment when we were shamed or we were hurt? And we carry it for the life. And Immaculée shows that if we can forgive, perhaps we can free ourselves. So that's why I zeroed in on Immaculée. So how do we sustain our spirit? It worked. Thank you. How do we sustain our spirituality in troubled times? Is the question. How do we? I'm not sure if you've had a chance to think about that. For me, the disposition of joy and the acronym of joy makes sense. joy. And we heard it today several times during the morning service. Even in the songs that we were singing, and the message, was there to be joyful. So the J in joy stands for Jesus, the Nazarene. I love the picture of the smiling Jesus. Anyone of you ever seen that picture? I used to have it on my Bible and it fell off, but it used to be here. This is the original color of the Bible. And I had the smiling Jesus there. And you can pull up the picture of the smiling Jesus. It's a wonderful picture because I really believe that's who Jesus was. He was laughing a lot. He was smiling all the time. He was welcoming people. I know we talked about that story. It may have started out with 50 people, then it came to 500, then it came to 5,000, and then it came to 15,000, right? The fish stories can become quite big after a while. But nonetheless, he attracted people. They were willing to follow him, and he had no microphone. He had none of this stuff that we have today. He just talked, and he kept them interested. He kept them right there, so much so that they forgot their hunger. Because it's getting late. Can you imagine how many hours he was speaking? So, the smiling Jesus. I think he told a lot of jokes as he went along. He probably looked at people and started laughing, and they said, "What are you laughing about?" So he'd tell a story, because that's what they did. They told stories. So Jesus, that smiling Jesus. And there is a difference, a profound difference between joy and happiness. We use it interchangeably. But joy is so different from happy. Happy is that smiling face at Walmart. Prices are falling. Right? And we're happy. We go there and we get something, price was $4.99, now it's $2.99. Oh, I'm a happy camper. But I come out and I find that the same item my friend picked up at the dollar store for 99 cents. There goes happy. And here comes angry, because I got gypped. So happy is external. My bills are paid. I'm living comfortably. I have no problems with my vehicle. No one's on my case. I'm a happy camper. Joy is not that. Joy is internal. Joy is internal. Joy you see in people's faces. Everything is going wrong. They're struggling. You know they're struggling. Whether it's health issues or with financial burdens or family breakup, yet they're smiling. And you're wondering, what is your secret? You see that in third world countries, right? They don't dress up very well. They have torn shirts, torn pants, We had two. We had one for daily use and one for Sunday. And you see these pictures, yet you see the smiling faces. Even when we came in if a visitor came into the town and they came to your house, the first word you would say is karibu, welcome. But karibu meant anything that's mine is yours. So they come into, like in Spanish we say it, right? Mi casa es su casa. It's right there. They would come in, and if they were eating, there was a platter in the middle, so there's plenty of room around. And everyone just took their turn. And you always were watching out for the next person. So guess what? That food multiplied. By the time you were done, everyone was fed. And that was joy, because as you were sharing, they were telling stories, communicating, connecting, convincing people that life was worth living. That's joy. And in the scriptures, we notice that too, that joy is distinct from happiness. In fact, thanks to AI, believe me, I didn't go through the scriptures looking for joy and happiness and to show the difference. So this is the result of AI. Joy and rejoice, those terms are used, depending what translations you're looking for, appear 300 to 400 times in the Bible, depending on the translation. 300 to 400 times. The word joy alone. Joy alone, those are derivatives, maybe joyful, maybe joyous. But joy alone appears 150 to 242 times. Do you know how many times happiness? 10 to 30 times. So already the distinction was being drawn between, in the Hebrew, in the Greek, between joy and happiness. They were using it meaningfully. The scholars, the Bible scholars.